City Council mics are on. All right, I'd like to call to order the special meeting, study session. Will follow our regular meet, or our study special meeting, but I'd like to call for a roll call first.
Mayor Brinkman. Mayor Pro Tem Valdez.
Present.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Here.
Councilmember Elrod.
Here.
Councilmember Fay. Here. Councilmember Schlachter.
Here.
Do we want to do pledge? I mean, even though it's a special study session, we don't.
That's up to you.
We don't normally.
You don't have to.
I'm just going to go ahead and move on. I would like to move into the, I'm looking for motions to recess to an executive session for
Yes.
1A, which is the city manager's review.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, I move to recess to an executive session for the purpose of holding a conference with City Council and appropriate staff and consultants under Charter Article 3, Section 27.5 and Section 24-6-402, 4F CRS to consider a personal matter concerning the city manager's annual review. I further move to return to the open meeting at the close of the executive session for the purpose of taking any formal action deemed necessary.
Thank you. And Council Member Cole, a second. Don't forget to vote.
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Cool. All right, we're moving on to 1B, update on city attorney recruitment.
I move to recess to an executive session for the purpose of holding a conference with City Council and appropriate staff under Charter Article 3, Section 27.5 and Section 24-6-402, 4F, for a personnel matter relating to an update on the city attorney recruitment. I further move to return to the open meeting at the close of the executive session for the purpose of taking any formal action deemed necessary.
Second.
And we have a second from Mr. Driscoll. Please vote.
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
If we can go to 1C, property negotiations.
I move to recess to an executive session for the purpose of holding a conference with the interim city attorney, city council, and appropriate staff under Charter Article 3, Section 27, paren 3, and Section 24-6-402, paren 4, paren A, CRS, regarding negotiations for the sale, lease, or purchase of real property located adjacent to Reynolds Landing for the purposes of open space. I further move to return to the open meeting at the close of the executive session for the purpose of taking any formal action deemed necessary.
Second.
We have Mr. Schlachter as the second. Please vote.
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, I'm going to adjourn to the study session or the special meeting right now, and then we will come back for the study session. So, do we have an estimated time at all?
I think it's about an hour to an hour and a half.
Okay, so we're looking for about an hour and a half. Great. If
And we're adjourning to an executive session?
we're adjourning to an executive session.
Thank you.
So we shall return, though. We are back from executive session where we discussed 1A, city manager review, 1B, update of city attorney recruitment, and 1C, property negotiations. There was no formal actions taken, and I am looking for a motion.
And there are no formal actions necessary at this point?
And there are no formal actions were taken, and there are no formal actions to be taken. Cool. With that, I'm looking for a motion to
I make a motion to adjourn?
are we going to special session though, right? I mean, study
For
session.
special, it's not
So we're
right.
going to adjourn to study session.
Correct. We're going to adjourn the special session.
All right, we have a motion,
Second.
and we are done. Vote.
Vote 6-0 and unanimous.
All right, it's unanimous. We are adjourned. Welcome to the study session where all the council is here except for Mayor Brinkman. All right, our first topic tonight will be the overview of Denver Water Littleton downtown water line replacement project.
We gotta get a better name than that if we're gonna continue to talk about it going forward. So, we'll jump right in. Keith Reister, Public Works Director. We got Paul Paquin, did I get it right? Peliquin, from Denver Water. He works with other organizations like ours as they do projects around the area. So, what the genesis of tonight's discussion is, not very long ago, Paul and the other team at Denver Water came in and said, we want to replace a whole bunch of water lines in downtown Littleton. So that was the primary genesis of this. And so what we decided to do is we've taken some steps since then, and we wanted to come and share that information with council, at least on a preliminary basis, and share with you some of the issues that we know we're going to have to face, and also get some direction from you on how we might want to face those and do some more work on it. Basically, this is what we're going to do. Review the project, discuss the importance and the key points, and give some direction. Denver Water is our water operator here in town. I appreciate that as a Public Works Director, that I have to manage the water system as well. They came to us about, initially they would like to have done this project this year, downtown. And basically what's driving that is, simply put, the pipes in most of downtown are 70 years old, or thereabouts. And so, you're starting to see deterioration, you're starting to see a lot of leak, and there's a map here in a second I'll show you as well. And as part of the work that they're doing in areas like this, they're also doing service line into structure improvements because a lot of the older areas have lines that the solder joints are lead, so they're trying to work those out of the system. They're not an issue in terms of health or safety, but they're just working their way through that system-wide right now as part of the projects that they do. So this map that you see behind us is the existing lines, and this was the project area that they would like to do. And you can see on there the historical information related to the main breaks are in the blue squares, and the service breaks, that's where it goes from the main into the structure, are there in the yellow box. So you can see that it's an area that's pretty prone to breaks, especially on the main lines. And this, do you remember what the time window is on this?
I think, as far as the breaks themselves, just over the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So the window's pretty recent on this as well. So just for orientation, that's Main Street on the top end, and Wrap down on the bottom, as well on the left, on the bottom. The other lines you can see in there, the other blue lines are other lines that operate in downtown. So when we first met with them, we wanted to talk about the magnitude of the project, some of the challenges that are going to be there. Mark and I have both been through projects where we've torn up downtowns to the consternation of many people. And we're obviously still here, so we survived that experience. So we have some background in this situation as well. So one of the first things that Denver Water was doing was an on-the-ground survey of the areas that you see there in green to prepare for their project. We made the decision to piggyback onto their project with the engineering firm that's doing that work for them and extend the survey area out to everything that you see in red. The blue that's in that image was Denver Water survey area, and we've added all of that to the survey in red as a piggyback because we're going to have to do that anyway. Those areas along Prince and some of those other areas for the work we're going to be doing over the next several years, so it's just more convenient for us to do it and get that information in our files at this point in time. So that's kind of where we're talking about. So I'm going to go back up to the project extent. So basically, like I said, most of the lines in here are between 60 and 70 years old. They're all cast iron, and they want to move to ductile pipe. Several of them will be upsized, not all of them, that are in there. You can see the extent of it. The service replacements typically for a structure, like if you were going to go have the service replacement done to your home on your own dime, it's going to run you $6,000 to $10,000. And all of those service lines are included in this project for the property owners. What that means from a construction standpoint is you're not just digging up the center of the street. You're digging up the stuff that goes to the buildings too. The sidewalk and the concrete and those kind of things. So that's part of the equation here. The strategy that Denver Water typically would use in a project like this is put the new line in, get it hooked up and working, and abandon the existing line in place. We'll finally have conduit downtown for fiber, but it'd be a really big pipe for that. So that's the usual strategy. One of the other things that I have a picture further. The trolley tracks are still in the road. And for those of you who have never done a project with trolley tracks, they are a nightmare. And our trolley tracks, several of the sections have concrete ties, which makes it even more difficult from a construction standpoint. So that's kind of the background on the whole project. We can certainly go over more details if you'd like. So the considerations that we want to cover just to get in front of you with are the extent of the work, potentials for how it can be scheduled, the deployment of work, probable closure needs, traffic flow and control, parking, service impacts to adjacent properties, streetscape impacts, and location of existing and past infrastructure, the trolley tracks. So what you have on Main Street is you basically have 4 potential travel lanes. You have 2 existing travel lanes and you have 2 parking lanes. Okay? Parking lanes in a construction project like this can be used as travel lanes if necessary. As we were talking about earlier, you would have to remove the bulb outs on several of the corners. The bulb outs, when you pull up and then we've got a cutout so people park in, it kind of delineates it. So in order to make it a travel lane, you have to pull some of those out.
What are those called again?
Bulb outs, like a bulb, like light bulb.
Bulb out.
Bulb.
Gotcha.
So that potential exists. The reality is you're going to always do this balance of, do you shut everything down and go as fast as you can? Or do you try and keep stuff open and it take a lot longer? That's always the trade-off in a construction project like this that you got to live with. So those are some of the things. And then from a planning perspective, yes, Peggy?
Can you clarify? When you say shut things down, you mean the stores?
The streets. People would still be able to access the stores via the sidewalks, but there would not be parking and there would not be flow-through traffic on the street. We'd have to detour it around.
Okay, so we'd be thinking as one issue where people would park.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Yep.
we might have a shuttle or something. That's a nitpicky thing, but I just wanted to get that.
So those are all things that are potentials, whether you keep it flowing or not. The other thing that, from a staff perspective, is we do not have a downtown plan or downtown streetscape plan. So if we're going to be tearing up our concrete, we want to go back with an improvement. We don't want, because we've talked in this group about, what do we do with the trees, what do we do with the tree grates, all the kind of things that are down there. And so a streetscape plan delineates that. You know what your design is going to be conceptually and how you're going to go. So when you're going in and, for example, when you're pulling up all that concrete for the service lines, what are you going to go back in with? You don't want to just have old concrete, new concrete patches all the way along. What do you want that to look like in your downtown? Because we certainly want to, if we're going to deal with that, we want to leverage the opportunity at the same time. So those are some of the things that we do not have in place as well. In Denver Water still in design, and the discussions we've had with them are that they would do RAP this year, and we would defer the other sections of work.
2019 this year?
That's 20, yes, that would be this year. And then, just checking. So.
Good question, Kareem.
Yeah, good.
That's
so,
what's important.
It's late, right? We're already got to have a little break in the action. So we would, RAP would be done this year, and then the other sections would give us time to do some work with Denver Water from a planning and design standpoint. It would give us an opportunity to take a look at what do we want to do about streetscape questions and those types of things. what are the alternatives of whether we keep part of it open and try and do it and those balances as well.
About the closure, 2 questions. How long would it take to closing the whole thing down versus not closing it down? And could Allen or Maine be two-way for that time?
Well, we certainly control that. We can always uncouple the couple.
Right.
That's always a possibility. Which opens up a permanent question, by the way, based on Mark and I's experience. So, Paul and I were talking about this a little beforehand. Do you have a feel from the...
And in talking to our construction management group, we wouldn't necessarily have to shut all 4 blocks down at the same time. They could do 1 block at a time, where you could,
And which 4 blocks are those again?
on Main Street.
All on Main?
Yes. Yeah, that's gonna be the real tricky part of it, is Main Street. So they could do 1 block at a time, or 2 blocks at a time, whatever works better to keep traffic flowing. So there's a lot of different ways we can go about this.
Are we looking at 1 month, 6 months,
If you knock it off.
9 months? I don't even know what is.
4 hours?
That'd be good.
He's optimistic.
Again, it's kind of a range there, depending upon how much we can close. Definitely closing the street helps, makes it go a lot faster. The estimate I got was anywhere between 3 and 4 months to do Littleton Boulevard, the entire thing.
Entire thing.
Oh, yeah,
The
Main Street,
The,
4 blocks.
yeah,
Is it on both sides of the street?
It's all gonna, so, because of the fact that we're still in design, we don't know where the new water main will end up. And that adds to the complication of things as far as changing over the services, the new main to the old main. So it just depends on where the new main ends up.
So potentially you could close half of the street on one side and half of the street on the other, so you could have that.
Yep.
those are all possible.
And one of the things that you talked about was removing those bulb outs while we do the work and then pouring them back into place after, where we could use the 2 full lanes.
That goes to the streetscape
I
question
support
for
that,
us.
depending on the streetscape,
Exactly,
yeah.
that goes to the streetscape question for us. I know I shut down an entire downtown for 3 months to go from an 18-inch pipe
Why are
to
you
a
still at
16-inch.
that? Why are you not at that city anymore?
I survived. Well, we used to get a half-inch rain and it would flood the downtown businesses, so it was a priority. That's one of the experiences. And the other part of it is, and this is something that Mark and I have had a fair amount of discussion going forward. By the way, scheduling-wise, one of the things that we've talked about with Denver Water is trying to coordinate the project against our low season in terms of downtown events. We may have to do some juggling around that, but that's something we've also talked about in terms of the time of year. I've talked a little bit about, the schedule that we've talked about. Some of the things that we know we don't have in place are a streetscape plan, a parking plan. We do not have any dollars allocated for this work for us.
This work meaning that parking plan, a streetscape plan, or for above and beyond? Like, what is our?
I think he's discussed.
Anything that's up there?
Everything that's on there is not funded right now.
So we would have to pay for, so what does Denver Water pay versus us as far as putting the road back together?
They have to put the road back. For sure.
Can we tear up some other roads that they can put back together too?
Don't worry, they're already doing that here in town. So there's that. And then the other question that Mark and I have talked about is, in the downtown projects that I've done, there's been a downtown organization to work with. There's been, whether it's a downtown chamber, whether it's a downtown BID, Business Improvement District, a downtown DDA, Development Authority, there's some kind of organization that the city is partnered with whether it's driven by a project like this or a bigger picture, like you just decide to do the streetscape yourself. And that does not exist here. And so is this a catalyst for that is a realistic question. And how does that move forward from a discussion standpoint and expectation standpoint from this group? So those are all things that are on the table right now. So that's the extent of the slides. So what I wanted to do tonight, our goal was to give you an overview of what we've talked about from a pure kind of construction and operational standpoint, but then also bring in some of the ancillary issues around it that come up as a result of it. That we don't have existing planning, that we have to figure out how we pay for improvements if we're going to do them ourselves, and then who else our partnership work with the businesses downtown. Because that's also, from a project management standpoint, that is a huge issue in terms of how you communicate with all those businesses down there, in terms of actually doing the work, and the residences down there, because you know, if you got to deal with every individual property owner every time you close or anything like that, and a conduit really helps in terms of managing a project like that with the public.
Do we have a drop dead date on this, or, I mean, how much time are we talking about here?
As far as we're concerned, no, we don't have a drop dead date.
It's just something that needs to be done.
Yes.
But you have 2019 for RAP.
Yeah, RAP had a lot of main breaks on it over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There was 6 main breaks on there. So that's why we really want to move forward and get that one done. And it doesn't really affect Main Street at all. In the last block, we had talked about this, between Main Street and Alamo, we were going to do that block. We were going to wait to do it as part of the Main Street because of the way the traffic moves through there.
So the other thing that can drive up the expediency of this is if the line decides to do its own thing under the ground.
Yeah.
So that can change your schedule dramatically, much like happened with the Broadway stormwater project here a few years ago. You can, you know, if all of a sudden the line decides that it's given its last breath and it wants to, you know, start creating a sinkhole or something, then things change pretty dramatically in terms of your timeline.
And that does happen.
Some things that I'd like us to also consider besides streetscape and parking is traffic plan for downtown. Multimodal. And what about, you know, creating a smart city? So if we're tearing up the streets, what else do we want to put underneath them?
One of the things that I did not list here is that we don't have an undergrounding plan either. We've got $4.2 million sitting in our Excel reserve account that we can't get access to because we don't have an undergrounding plan, which costs us probably $50,000 or $60,000 to get in place. So those are the kind of dollars we can bring to help with the undergrounding portion of the utilities that's available to us. So those opportunities do exist for us.
So I think we should put out all of the possibilities. I'd like to see all of the possibilities and opportunities we should consider, and then determine what is possible or what is a priority.
I agree with that statement. The challenge for me as your Public Works Director is none of that stuff exists today from a planning and design standard anywhere in our files. So in order to answer that question, we have to do that work. So, you know, obviously we've got a whole bunch of other priorities and we have to figure out how to do that. And this is also something where we can't just go design something in a vacuum. This is not one of those places, it's like a 45-mile-an-hour road and nobody next to it. So, you know, you're going to have public engagement. You're going to have those things as we go through it. So you've got all of that part of it. So we absolutely support having all of that information. That's part of a downtown plan, all of those things. So, but it's just not something that we have in place today. None of those things actually exist today.
Yeah, let's go, Carol, then I think I'd like to hear from Mark, too.
Is it possible, physically possible, to bring back part of the trolley tracks as historic Littleton?
Yes. Operating a trolley, done transit, I'd really prefer not to get back in that business personally.
Are you saying operate the trolley or just have the tracks as a visual?
Two possibilities. It seems that there are organizations around that are really excited about operating trolley, and that could be a huge attractant to historic downtown Littleton.
I've done some partnership work with a group that operates the train trolley by the stadium along the South Platte River, and it's a nonprofit, but you got to bring a lot of money to the table, and volunteers operate the whole thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something you can address a little bit more deeply, why or why not. Mark?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just a couple of thoughts here. And again, these are conversations that Keith and I have been having here since we heard about Denver Water and their intent here. certainly support what Denver Water is trying to accomplish here. We obviously want to replace our infrastructure in a timely manner. I think this is obviously going to be a very significant impact to businesses and property owners on Main Street. There's going to be a lot of concern about this. And so I think, appreciate that Denver Water is willing to kind of work with us to try to figure out how to minimize some of that impact. I think what Keith and I are specifically recommending is, since we don't have a real downtown kind of organization, authority or anything, we're going to have to suggest some kind of a steering committee where we reach out to businesses and property owners and try to find some people to work with us and Denver Water to kind of work through these issues. I think council's seeing the possibility of some things we could, since we're tearing things up, we could put back into the street system here. And I think it's just going to take some conversation with Denver Water, trying to figure out where they're going to put their main and kind of those opportunities. And then obviously at this point in time, we really don't have enough answers. And this is going to take a pretty significant effort. I think Keith touched on one of the key points is once we start having a plan that comes together, communication is going to absolutely be key. And that's what our property owners, our business owners are really going to look to us to try to help manage that, and certainly Denver Water.
Great. All right. Anything else from us? Good.
Unless you have other comments about this, we have lots of ideas about what it could be, but I think we would like to start that steering committee sooner rather than later.
So is that the next steps?
I think
Is that what you're asking us for?
Yes, correct. If you're comfortable with that, then
yep. Say do it. Nothing else, let's move on to the next item.
My goal is to not have a fountain down there in the middle of the street this summer. Pipe will stay in place.
Yeah, we need a hole.
Thanks, Paul, for coming down and sticking it out with us.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. All right, you need any transition time? You ready to go?
see, we should be able to switch presentations.
All right, we're ready to move right into study session item 1B, overview of Metropolitan District.
No, I'm not gonna sit here.
So if we get close, when you get a chance to introduce yourself.
I'll slide over here and.
Do you want me to
Last
read it,
one,
or do you
right?
want to read it?
Jennifer,
Sure.
do you mind making some introductions, please?
Absolutely.
Jennifer Henninger, Community Development Director, and with me I have Peggy Dowswell and Chad Walker from Pinnacle. And we as a city have them on retainer, if you will, to review metro districts that we get in. We have asked them to come here tonight to kind of present a Metro Districts 101. And this is kind of a step in preparation for, we have received a request from a developer in the city to form a Metro District. And right now what we have on the books with the city, we feel could use a little bit more to help the city in regulating metro districts. So what Peggy and Chad are going to do is kind of give you a general overview of what metro districts are and what they can do and the tool that they can be for development and creating really development partnerships with the city and the developer. And then we'll go into some questions and really try to get some direction from you of how you would like to proceed from here. So, Keith, do you have anything to add?
So basically, we're here just to get an idea of what the metropolitan districts are. And then from staff, we're going to hear a little bit about the overview of the points in support of.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, if I may just quickly add, this is going to be the first of probably many conversations about metro districts. So this truly is the intent. It's kind of 101 and get a little discussion going about some of the more significant issues. We'll have to come back to you later based on your conversation here with perhaps a code change and some regulation that kind of connects to all this. But there's obviously a lot of conversation in the Front Range about metro districts, quite honestly throughout the state, and Pinnacle certainly has a lot of experience about that.
Again, if you give us your names one more time.
Sure.
Chad Walker.
Peggy Dowswell.
So, good?
Please proceed.
Awesome. I'll dive in. So, we'll give a very brief
introduction, but we'll kind of abbreviate the presentation a little bit. This presentation can take an hour, it can take 4 hours. Let's not go for the 4 hour. Make sure everybody's awake, so.
Ram it into 30.
We'll condense it, and we'll certainly give an abbreviated version. Once we get through the presentation, then we'll take every question that you have. As Mark identified, this is going to be the first of many conversations. So really our goal tonight is to give you a good baseline. We'll make sure that you have our cards if you'd like to contact us through Keith and Mark or whatever your preferences of how to get a hold of for additional questions or concerns. But that's kind of the goal.
I think, Mark, you prefer the questions go through your, please. Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
Please hit the space bar or something, probably.
Oh, that's easy.
So, yeah, I do. So really briefly, and I'll pass these, thank you, sir. So really briefly, Pinnacle Consulting, just over 16 years old, just had the opportunity to grow to where we are today. We have 40 people on staff. We have an office in northern Colorado in Loveland. We have also an office down in the Tech Center, just off Bellevue. We cover districts from Steamboat down to Pueblo. So we cover the state quite well, Front Range. We have a little bit of work over on the western slope, not near as much as others do, but we have just over 100 different metropolitan districts that we manage. We manage them from management administration to finance and accounting, as well as capital infrastructure, the very thing that Keith was speaking to earlier, as well as operations. So we really try to provide a soup to nuts services for our districts. And then we also provide municipal services. So in this capacity, as well as kind of a hired gun for accounting and finance management as well. So that's kind of who we are. So we'll dive right in. One of the basics, if you will, what's a Title 32 district? And so one of the misleaders is that Title 32 district is an HOA. It's not. It is a local government. And so it is formed under Title 32 in the state statute. And there's really two forms, if you will. So there's a single purpose, and then there's a metro district. And a single purpose is what you hear of when you have a water district, a sanitary sewer district, park and rec district, something that they provide a single service to the public. A metropolitan district is just where you have multiple services that they provide. Usually when we form a metropolitan district on a new project, you're covering the gamut. So you have street, sewer, water, storm, park and rec, and usually you have other facilities that come with it. But you never see hospital services in there. You never see fire services in there. So, but there's multiple services that usually come with a metropolitan district. I keep hitting the wrong one. Gotcha. Another misleader. So it's always interesting to talk to folks about metro districts and their assumption when they got started. So it's not an anomaly from the 90s. It has been around, they have been around as an entity that provides outside rural areas services since '49. That's when it first came into being a tool for the state of Colorado. Other states have similar tools. So California has Melrose. Texas has MUDS, if you will. Don't ask me what the acronym stands for, I forgot just now. But there's other tools in other states. For Colorado, we use Title 32 districts, and they've been around since '49. There's more than 3,700 special districts. Of those 3,700 special districts, we have just over 1,500 metropolitan districts. So what's the delta of that? That's your fire districts, your park and rec districts, your hospital districts, all those other districts that are in existence. Why districts? Keith had touched on this a little bit. It is a great tool that facilitates very healthy public-private partnerships. And so it creates an opportunity to fund public infrastructure through bond issuances, public funding, that we can create opportunities to create that infrastructure. Public infrastructure can be financed over time with tax-exempt interest rates. Property owners can deduct taxes, which you can't with an HOA. And permanent operations and maintenance is a big one for us. So what we see is with many of our metropolitan districts, they have, in the last 7 years, have been able to take on HOA functions. Architectural review, covenant compliance, those kinds of things that really eliminate the need for an HOA. And so because the district can work in that capacity, it eliminates the need for it and the fee that's associated with the HOA usually. And so the mill levy is really their singular fee for living in that area, and that's where it's beneficial that that's tax deductible. So what districts can do? So really simply, the districts can construct public improvements, and then they can operate them and fund them long-term. That's the crux of it. You want to governance?
Sure. All right. So districts are governmental entities. So we talk about that public-private partnership. So the private part of that is probably the developer entity, property owner, coming through to the city for a service plan for another governmental entity. So a lot of the governance is similar to the city. Districts are governed by an elected board of directors. So every 2 years, districts hold elections, and usually those are just for the boards. May have even number years, although this can be changing in 2 or 3 years to odd years. They do have eligible electors, and again, similar statutes as what you all do for qualifying your electors and making sure they are eligible. The city is not liable for any debt or obligation of those metropolitan districts or Title 32 districts. They're completely separate. Governance, financials, debt, completely separate from the city. Districts are not a governmental general jurisdiction. There's no police power and no land use. All of that will still be done the same way it's being done, even though there might be a district. So the developer will come to the city, abide by the same rules that you have. If the district puts the improvements in, again, it will abide by the same regulations of the city. So really no difference there. It doesn't take any power away from the city at all, just layered on top of that.
So that piece, if I may.
Yes.
That piece, when we have our public-private partnership with the district and the developer, we also get to really forge a great partnership with the city that really enhances, hopefully we feel it usually enhances the process of the municipality. But that synergy of that relationship is really beneficial to the project. So as Peggy said, there's really a parallel process going on when we're going through a formation. So we will take the district through a formation process where we submit that to the city and we're trying to get that approved through the city, where the developer will actually go through the development process, which is very similar to a private project. It doesn't change, so.
And I think that one of the nice things, another differentiation between the districts and HOAs, if you will, districts have all the same transparency rules that the cities do. So public meetings, public elections, and then of course the records are all public also. Can we keep going?
Sure.
All right, favorite part. So you can see here, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you will probably recognize some of these statute references, especially the election code is the same, very similar budget and audit requirements, Open Records Act, and because we are very familiar with the construction parts of those, public bidding requirements similar to the cities.
So formation organization, I touched on it very briefly. Really, this is just a big picture of what that looks like. So formation, it takes anywhere between 8 to 10 months to get through a full formation. As Peggy said, it ties back to an election. So either the election is in November on even and odd years or May on even years. So everything backs up within 10 months for us to get started. We start out by doing many different exhibits, from maps to costs to operation plans, and those are all exhibits that we give off to one of our attorneys that then actually draft the service plan. Whether they're taking a template from a city or they're drafting from bare bones, there's still a template. Though they may charge like they're drafting from bare bones. It's still coming from the template. So everybody likes to have some kind of template from the municipality. So the point of that is, so we move forward with that, and once we finalize that, we've been working with staff usually through that process to make sure that we're on the same page, what's going to be presented to the board. And so we will then submit to the city the service plan and all the exhibits that go with it. Next, once we get approval through the city, we actually will go to court. And we actually will get petition for organization. And we get the authority from the court to then hold a general election. That enables us to then go to the election. And then once our election is done and our election is certified, we actually go back to court and we get certified as a government entity at that time.
So a question about the election, it's an election of the property owners within the metro, who would be within the metro district?
So not who would be, only those that own property.
in.
So very similar to your general election. So you have to own property within the boundaries of Littleton.
So for, say, a developer setting up a new metro district, they'd be the only elector, right?
Yes. They would at the time, yeah.
Okay, true. And then how would a board of directors be set up at that point in time if there's no one? Would they be the board of directors too
It
then?
would be the board of directors,
Until
yes.
then, people would move in there or businesses would move in there or whatever.
Exactly. Now, businesses wouldn't be eligible electors.
Well,
unless
if they own the property, that's what I'm saying.
In their name, if they did, yes.
So that's the qualifiers of sitting on the board. You have to be a registered voter of the state of Colorado and then a property owner within the district.
So a resident that is not a property owner could not vote?
A resident can.
Someone's renting an apartment?
Actually, you can't.
They can.
A renter as well, so.
Yes.
Is this what Pinnacle then does, that you walk us through this whole process? Or
Yes.
you handle this process?
Well, we're here actually on your behalf, so we would help you when a developer brought a service plan to the city. Yes.
So basically, what happens is if a developer wants to do a metro district, there's certain requirements. We don't have templates in place here, but they come to us with a service plan, which really outlines what they plan to do, what their debt looks like, how they plan to do it, what's encompassed. And we need to review that and approve that service plan. And that's where somebody, with Pinnacle's expertise, we bring to the table to assist all of our staff in doing it.
What's the name of the developer that came to us?
Well, there's one in the city now.
One metro district right now.
Correct.
Yes.
Littleton Village.
That's it.
And, the individuals that are, the developers related to the southwest corner of Mineral and Santa Fe have talked to us. The Metro District is part of their development plans.
So your service plan, so Ellen Pogue categorizes it quite well, that it's really we're building a box. So the box really is defining our district services and powers, defining the facility ownership and operation, your debt cap, and then also your millage cap. And that's what you're identifying within your service plan. So as we would expect in any other municipality that we work in, when this gets submitted to the city, we take parts and pieces from it, but there's special counsel that's usually hired for this very specific purpose to run through the legalities of that service plan to make sure they endorse it and bless it with your legal staff. And so that's really a separation of roles there really quick. Construction. So another piece that is a little bit unique to metropolitan districts, really there's many different ways that we can measure, but really there's two basic ways that we can construct improvements within a metro district. One, the developer comes in, they have a competitive bid process, they construct all the improvements on the property, the street, sewer, water, storm, and then they come back with that documentation, they certify it with the district, they are granted a note, and then the district will issue a bond for a partial reimbursement then of those improvements. So we call that where it's constructed by the developer at that time. Thank you. It's that.
I don't know if I can go backwards.
Here's page up.
Okay. So that's what happens with the developer. So funded by the developer initially, and it's what we call a reimbursement model. And so at a future date, they will be reimbursed for a portion. For residential districts, we're seeing a reimbursement of somewhere between 30 to 40%. Another misleader is developers are getting 100% reimbursement. It's not happening unless there's oil and gas involved, which I assume you don't have oil and gas sites in the middle of town. So we would expect.
We're keeping them secret.
Only on our property.
That's right. That's the way to do it.
So with that, any questions on developer construct really quick before I move? So constructed by the district, very similar process. However, because it's being constructed by the district, no different than if it's constructed by the town, you have to go through a public bid process. So we'll walk you through a public bid process. We identify the lowest qualified bidder. It gets awarded, they construct it on a monthly basis. We're actually accepting the invoices and we're actually certifying those costs as they come in. So it's actually a growing note, if you will, on a monthly basis. Now, the district doesn't have any money, so all that money is being fronted, if you will, from the developer. So that infusion of cash is still coming from the same source, and that's the developer in this case. And so once that project is done, we have a note that's in place, and then at some point, when the district can afford a bond, we issue a bond and we repay the developer a portion of those improvements. So similar processes, one's a public process, one's a private process, ends up in the same place as far as a reimbursement of a portion. We put on to those at a future date. We have a fairly strong opinion on what's best for a municipality, but that's our opinion. So we can certainly get into that later. Operations. Really, the district operations, we're focused on the administration side of that, which is daily operations of any facility that we've accepted, state and local compliance. That happens a lot through our administration department, also with legal counsel that would be assigned to that district, representing the district, contract administration, and then board meetings. That's really the crux, if you will, of our operations. We usually meet depending on the size of the district and really the level of business, monthly and sometimes quarterly. Construction of public infrastructure, obviously we just went through that. That's another function of the district. And then facility operations, just depending on what kind of facilities the district's retained.
Also in those facilities, you can imagine residential districts. We have quite a few districts that have pools, rec centers, workout areas, those kinds of things. We have some commercial districts that have some large parks. And so it just depends on the public facilities. Streets, water, sewer is likely going to the cities. And then those amenities, if you will, are the district to operate and maintain. So we're not seeing, I noticed something in your code that said something about dissolution of the district. We're seeing long-term use of those districts, and mainly because of the operations, and now, like Chad mentioned, the covenant compliance and some of those types of things are staying in the district long-term. Once the debt is paid off, we have seen districts go back to the city and ask for permission, more permission to bond or go through an election to replace facilities, build a pool if they didn't have one. So it's a good long-term vehicle for those residents or property owners in the long term. One, same public process as the city has as far as transparency, those kinds of things, but also the financial wherewithal to be able to finance future public improvements.
Do districts have a natural end, like 20 years or?
The debt has a natural end, usually 20, 30 years, but the districts continue to operate facilities that they own. They may forever operate a park, a pool, a rec center.
So the district doesn't go away when the debt goes away?
No, not automatically. And that's something I think that you guys have thought in the past, but since the districts obtained all these other powers, again, we're seeing them replace HOAs. So they do last forever. Eventually the developer, the original developer, is going to be gone. They're going to be sold out of all their, homes or whatever, and the constituents will take over that board and they'll run the district. You only have to meet once a year, so there's not a lot going on other than compliance, or if you have a management firm, they'll take care of all your compliance. But yes, we are seeing those last forever, possibly.
So the two aspects, basically, it's a financing operation for building a development, and then it acts as a
long-term
operations of facilities that the city would not have to necessarily pay for. That it would act as more of an HOA. It would take care of street maintenance and trash.
Actually, typically, in a lot of cases, the streets are built to our standards and we end up taking the streets. they come under our ownership over time, and we maintain them.
And that would be part of the whole agreement.
Yeah, it would depend on the agreement. Yes.
So then that's the qualifier we keep making, depending on which facilities the district retains. So like any other traditional development, usually the water goes to somebody, the sewer goes to somebody, the streets go to somebody. Usually it's the city or a district, a water district or a sewer district.
If there were no responsibilities left with the district, yes, it could dissolve after the debt was paid off.
You know, we're on a 5-minute warning. At 10 o'clock,
Great.
council does a vote to we continue or not.
Okay.
All right. I think we can finish, Jim. All right, so real quick on district financing. And actually, I think, yeah, can you go to sources of revenue? Great. So sources of revenue, property tax, mill levy. No sales tax, although we did get permission to do that in certain instances, but largely the districts are supported by either property tax revenue or fees, rates, and tolls. Say they have a non-pot system or a pool, there could be fees imposed at that level. So those are the two ways, property taxes and then fees, rates, and tolls. Some of our districts operate their own water and sand services or non-pot, something like that. You want to back up? And district financing, and I know your finance manager was here. This is very similar to the way the city bonds. So you have a revenue stream that enables you to bond, and we are seeing right now those happen largely before a lot of build-out is constructed, because the market right now is very hot for Colorado paper, and investors are willing to invest in what we call lovingly dirt bonds, but and with a decent rate actually. And we can talk about later about how the property owners are protected on that. Yeah, you can keep going. And the last thing, which you all probably know, this is just a sample calculation between commercial and residential, because sometimes people don't pick up that commercial is assessed at 29%, while residential now is 7.2, and I think the legislature took it down to 7.15, I think. Yeah.
It's lower.
This is impacted by Tabor and Gallagher as well.
It's Gallagher.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. That's it for presentation.
Awesome.
Should have done your 5-minute warning a half hour ago, Jared.
Really? Everyone beats 4 hours. Council, we have questions. Marina.
You talked about some of the advantages, transparency, et cetera. I've also read that one of the reasons that HOAs are going to a district model is for legal and risk purposes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So the districts have, the same as the city has, governmental immunity. So there are caps on what people can, sue the district for in that regard. What else? On risk mitigation?
Well, clarity really quick. So associations are going to districts because you can't change your entity status without getting an election of everybody that lives within that association. But you are seeing that from the beginning that's being used instead.
What's driving that change?
So what's driving that change is it's a tool, it's a financing tool, it's an operations tool, and it's a risk mitigation tool. So all of those things then usually also, we find that municipalities find this entity more favorable than a developer. So we're able to, than an HOA and a developer. And the reason I say a developer alone is because there's a governmental entity that will be working with you as a city to operate and take care of the constituents that live within this district.
Government to government.
So that layering with a developer, to put a district with a developer, creates that additional layer of assurance for you guys as a municipality.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was a good start for us.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Council, we have one more item on our agenda, which is the potential ballot issues for 2019, 2020. I know Mayor Brinkman is interested in this one, and I think, Mark has suggested that we maybe reschedule this one?
Reschedule this here for another time. It's late, plus the mayor would probably like to.
Yeah, I think so we can do sometime, so it's not like have to take action anytime soon?
No.
Okay, cool.
No.
Although there is a schedule that we'll have to keep to.
Correct, yeah, you can't wait too long.
Right.
I can reschedule.
So it looks like sometime next month, looks like.
I guess I'm okay with that.
You okay with that, Patrick?
So We're really looking forward to it.
Middle, what did you say?
Middle of July, you need to have your ballot initiatives.
So that means by July 11th.
They really want us to
All right.
go through.
Well, if we have nothing else, anybody?
You guys-
We have anything from city manager?
No.
City attorney? Cool. We're adjourned. Okay, thank you.